Welcome to Where They Wander. We are Kat and Kev, and we travel full-time around the United States in our Grand Design Imagine.
Good morning. Today we are in Savannah, Georgia. We're taking the old trolley tour.
We're going to do the on and off tour. It's about $40 each, and it's an hour and a half tour if you just stay on it the entire time. But also you can get on and off at your convenience to whatever spots that you want to do. So let's go tour Savannah.
These trolleys are great. They're called the Old Town Trolleys, and they're all over the country in different major cities. Here we have Kat in the wild looking at the map.
In the wild.
The trolley tour takes you throughout the historic area, beginning with the waterfront, where you can stop in at the Prohibition Museum, do some tourist shopping, or at night, this is apparently a great place for good food.
Just before Washington Square is the home of General McIntosh, where George Washington stayed during his one and only visit to Georgia. It was built in 1770 and is considered the oldest house in the state of Georgia.
The home of Simon Murault was built in the 1860s. Mr. Murault was one of the first prosperous free African Americans in Savannah. This strip of green is the site of the original dueling grounds, conveniently located right next to the cemetery.
Now, in 1965, this became our first nationally recognized historic landmark for the city of Savannah. Then coming up to our left-hand side, you're going to find the McCity Fire Bell. Duke weighs in at 5,500 pounds. This bell utilized by the fire department to identify where the fire brigades are to report. So if they had a fire in square number 1, they ring it once. So fire in square number 2, they ring it twice. And that's fine unless your house was on fire and it was on square 23.
The Sorrel Weed House, built in 1840, was the childhood home of Moxley Sorrel, the youngest brigadier general in the Confederate Army at only 26.
And right now we are in Madison Square. Savannah was founded and laid out by General Oglethorpe from the UK, and he was the first governor here. It was originally built with 24 squares. There are now just 22. It has a lot of history. Sherman did not burn Georgia. He did burn Atlanta, and then when he came here, the Confederate general that was in charge of Georgia, he said, no, we're going to surrender, and they retreated to... I don't know where they went. Anyway, they retreated, which is why it is one of the best preserved historic cities, not only the South, but definitely all of America. As we mentioned, the Confederate soldiers surrendered so that Savannah could be saved, and this was the house that General Sherman stayed at. Apparently a lot of people come to Savannah for the azaleas. They are very, very pretty, and they are all over the city. This house here, it was called the Comer House, and Jefferson Davis, the proclaimed president of the South, stayed here with his daughter in 1886. Many of the buildings here are restored and maintained and preserved by Savannah's College of Art. It's incredible that this small college that only started in the 1970s with about 60 students actually now has one of the largest collection of historic buildings in the United States. And they also have campuses all over the world. So they've done such an amazing job. What they do is that they purchase these buildings that need restoring, they restore them, and then they utilize them for the college campus. So way to go, that's pretty cool. This right here is the Armstrong Kessler Mansion. It's on Bull Street, and it is stunningly beautiful. Built in 1919 as the home of Savannah shipping magnate George Ferguson Armstrong, this private residence is now owned by the preservationist and hotelier Richard C. Kessler. Here we are now entering probably the most popular and most famous of the parks. of the squares in Savannah. This is Forsyth Park. The most famous thing, of course, is the fountain, which we're going to go have a look at. This park is set on 10 acres by William Brown Hodgson in the beginning of the 1840s. He conceived the idea and he set aside 10 acres of wooded land at this site, and it was named after Georgia's governor John Forsyth. William Bershoff was the person who created the original landscape design. In 1854, the fountain and the radiating walks that come off of it were added. The fountain is called Forsyth Fountain. It was modelled after the Place de la Concorde fountain in Paris, and it was completed in 1858.
Located on the east side of Forsyth Park, the Candler oak tree is the oldest living tree in Savannah. It's believed to be 350 to 400 years old.
And as you get to the end of this pedestrian walkway here, there is a huge monument. Let's go see who it's to. Let's have a look. Quite beautiful. And they are. And the Confederate soldier on top. We saw a similar monument with a soldier on top like that at Bunker Hill. No, not Bunker Hill. Close to Bunker Hill though. I don't think there's a city we've been in that can compete with Savannah for its original buildings. Well, not in America anyway. And
Certainly everywhere north of here was destroyed.
Right. Yep.
In the southern states.
Yeah, definitely. And this is, I think it's now a hotel. We'll find out what it was.
Now the Hotel Brado. This was once a private residence. The mansion was built in 1883 and was originally called the Lewis Caton House.
The Oglethorpe Club, now a private club, but it was once the home of Henry R. Jackson, the Union Army headquarters from 1865. It was built in 1857 by Edmund Molyneux, a British consul of Savannah. A little known fact about the Revolutionary War was that many people came here to fight against the British, but they weren't people who lived here, or what was back then the colonists. They were actually from all over Europe. The most famous obviously is Lafayette, but this is Pulowski. Pulowski was a Polish hero of the Revolutionary War, and he lost his life at the Siege of Savannah in 1779, but he fought for the independence of America. On top is Lady Liberty, and she is holding the flag of the United States in one hand and the laurel wreath of peace in the other. We are going to go see the Mercer-Williams House. Here we have it. It's the Mercer-Williams House. This was primarily famous originally now by movies and the book The Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. Of course, that was a true story. John Williams was the gentleman who lived here. He was a very famous art dealer.
In 1981, he shot and killed his companion, Danny Hansforth. He was tried 4 times for this crime. He was convicted of the murder twice, both of which were overturned. The third trial ended in a mistrial, and he was finally acquitted of the murder in trial number 4.
All right, we are going to go down to the carriage house, which is where John Cusack stayed in the movie. He was the reporter that came to really just report on a Christmas party that was being held, and of course got enveloped into the story and the murder, and was also one of the key witnesses. But then he went on to write a book, and the reason it's called Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil was because that the protagonist of the story actually met with a voodoo priestess in the Bonaventure Cemetery, in the African-American section of the Bonaventure Cemetery, half an hour before midnight and half an hour after midnight. Half an hour before is for good, and then half an hour after is for evil. And she would do spells, and he had her all the way through his trial, doing spells and cursing people, etc. He got away with it, so. All right, we're here at the carriage house, and we are going to go in and take a tour.
Unfortunately, they didn't allow photography of any kind inside the house. But trust us, it's worth it. We ended our day with dinner at the Sixpence Pub, which was okay. Let's head on to Bonaventure.
We are here at the world-famous Bonaventure Cemetery. We wanted to make sure that you know if you're going to do a self-guided tour, stop at the office first because the visitor parking is right by the water here. This is the Wilmington River.
Wilmington River.
And it's miles away from the office, so now we're going to walk the 10 minutes back to the office to get a self-guided tour. You can get tours, of course, but they cost between $20 and $50.
And it's free to come in here and park and just walk around.
Right, exactly. But just beware, like we said. It's a long way from the visitor parking to the main office. All right, let's do it. This here is the first tomb you come to when you enter the cemetery from the main gate, and it's called the Gaston Tomb. This is actually named the Stranger's Tomb. This was built to honor the memory of Savannah's perfect host, William Gaston. This is to lay people to rest who pass away in Savannah, but wish to be permanently laid to rest elsewhere. It's a sad day. Why is it a sad day, you ask? Well, as you know, one of the things that I loved about visiting Savannah was going to the Mercer-Williams House, which is where Jim Williams, in self-defense, murdered his assistant. Not murder, I'm sorry, shot and killed, in self-defense, his assistant. However, on the book cover of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, stands she's called the Bird Girl, or someone called her Little Wendy, and basically it's this statue. So we came to Bonaventure Cemetery, not just to view her, I'll give you that, but also to see what is, without doubt, one of the most beautiful cemeteries we've ever been in. She's not here. After the success of the movie and the success of the book, which was on the bestsellers list for over 4 years, she was moved to a museum.
An unprecedented 4 years,
yes,
mind you.
An unprecedented 4 years, mind you. She was moved. So she's at the Telfast Museum, which we passed and didn't go in. We love to visit cemeteries. We've been to cemeteries in Philadelphia, New York, Trinity Church in New York, where Hamilton's buried, along with lots of other people. Boston, where most of the signers of the Declaration of Independence are buried. You know, just lots and lots of cemeteries. We do like them because this is where a lot of important people from history are buried. This is the grave of John Walz. He was Savannah's most prolific sculptor of stone. As Kev just pointed out, his stone looks unfinished. Isn't that amazing? He emigrated to America at age 13 with his sister and ended up becoming a craftsman in stonemasonry and carvings. This is very pretty.
Most of the things that you see in here were put together by the Bonaventure Historical Society, such as this plaque here, the bench, and that other plaque that you were looking at for Mr. Walz back there.
Whilst this entire cemetery is beautiful, the most historic area is E to H. And that's where we're at now, and we're trying to find the little girl. So let's see if we can find her. Well, we found little Gracie. This is the first sculpture of Walz. This is what made him famous. And sadly, it is of a little girl. Her name was Gracie, and she died in 1890 at the age of 6. One of the oldest graves we have here is of Noble Jones, who passed away in 1775. He arrived here with James Oglethorpe in 1733. He built the Wormslow plantation in 1742, and he was the surveyor for Savannah. He also organized the first local militia in 1751 and served on the Royal Council. We are now at Plantation Square, and the reason it's called Plantation Square was, of course, this was originally a plantation, and it was called Bonaventure, or Good Fortune. With the Royal Governor James Wright in January 1776, he evaded revolutionary captors and fled to Cockspur Island. He had lived here. It had once been a hospital for French troops, and in June of 1782, the 600 acres of Bonaventure tract was sold at public auction. It was purchased at that public auction by Josiah Tatnall, the youngest grandson of the Mulrynes, and returned to Bonaventure. Here he married Harriet Fenwick and introduced the island cotton from the Bahamas and was elected state senator. His wife Harriet died in 1802 and he buried her here at the plantation house. Officially, Harriet is the first identified adult buried in what was later to become Bonaventure Cemetery. Even though John Noble died earlier, he was not originally buried here. This is the Tatnall family, and this was Commodore Tatnall's grave, the second one right here. Now, he fought in 3 separate wars, and he is also attributed with the phrase blood is thicker than water. So that second one right there is the Commodore, and then this is his wife. Well, here we are at the side of the Mercer grave. Of course, these graves are still family plots, so they do ask you not to go in, which we have not. We are at the side. This is the site of his mother. His mother's grave is right here, and it says on the front of this, "My mama done told me." But over here, there's a bench, and I'll put the picture up, but I'll just read to you just some of the songs that he wrote. Accentuate the Positive, Autumn Leaves, Blues in the Night, Charade, Jeepers Creepers, Laura, Moon River, My Shining Hour, On the Atchison, Topeka, and the Santa Fe.
Hooray for Hollywood! In the cool, cool, cool of the evening. One for my baby. Skylark. Something's gotta give. That old black magic. You must have been a beautiful baby.
If you don't know, Kevin and I met singing Barbershop. He was in the World Championship Masters of Harmony, and I'll put a link, and I sang with the Cheshire Chord Company. And pretty much all of those songs have been sang by one or both of us at some time, either on stage, in quartet, or in chorus. Thank you, Johnny Mercer. I never knew you'd written those songs.
When you think of a lot of songs, you may think of the Beatles. They wrote over 200 songs, 213. But when you look at Johnny Mercer, he wrote the words and or music to over 1,500 songs.
He won 4 Academy Awards for music, and he was the co-founder of Capitol Records. Over here we have another Walz memorial, another memorial carved and designed by John Walz, which I believe is this one, to James L. Foster.
We hope you've enjoyed our trip around Savannah and the Bonaventure Cemetery. Join us next time as we take a walking tour of Charleston. Until then, we'll see you on the trail.